Welcome to the New Commission's Artist Talk series for the new site-specific artworks, sponsored by the Houston Airport System at George Bush Intercontinental Airport and Houston Hobby Airport, on behalf of the City of Houston's Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs. Hosted by Houston Arts Alliance Director of Civic Art and Design, Grace Zuniga. Please welcome William Cannings.
My name is William Cannings. My artwork is called Clouds, and it's at Gate 50 of Hobby International Airport. I'm originally from England. I was born in Manchester, England, and grew up in a small town called Nantwich in Cheshire. I now live in Lubbock, Texas. I'm an associate professor of sculpture at Texas Tech University School of Art. I got my master's degree at Syracuse University. Then I adjunct back at Syracuse, and then I got the job at Texas Tech. So that's what brought me down to Lubbock.
Can you describe your piece for the audience?
Sure, it's an installation of, let me remember, 30 inflated steel clouds that are finished in 3 various shades of white, silver white, and platinum. So they all reflect the incoming light and color from the glass block wall, because this installation is on the west wing. The afternoon and evening light comes in, is very yellow and rich, so it bounces off of those forms beautifully.
And is there a significance to the number 30?
No, just felt right. A lot of my work, I use my head and my heart and my gut felt like 30 was a good number.
Can you talk about your process in working with steel?
Sure. Let's see, I developed a process of inflating steel 22 years ago when I first got hired at the university. I was hired to teach welding and metal fabrication, and I just got tired of seeing your same old usual metal fabricated sculptures. I kind of had a moment in the studio one night where I wondered if I could inflate steel like I saw my friends' work inflated. And this was Valentine's Day. So I cut out 2 steel patterns from sheet metal, welded them together, and here I am today, 22 years later, still inflating steel. So I use a lot of techniques I learned. I was a British and Italian race car mechanic when I lived in Richmond, Virginia. I started to use my skills as a sculptor to fix things and repair things. That in turn led me to an internship with a race car builder. These techniques have stayed with me when I went back to school to finish my degree up, and I take advantage of them now. So pretty much that's how I've got to where I am. So the paints I use are automotive. I use automotive processes to finish those with a spray gun and a paint booth. So they're all base coat, clear coat. They can be touched, they can be handled without any fear for the surfaces, but it gives me a wide range of colors. I'm beginning to realize that the sculptures themselves are just becoming canvases for color and reflected light within my work that I'm interested in.
Can you talk about the, for this piece specifically, representing a natural element in an industrial material that then displays as a temporary, man-made object? And talk about that a little bit in your thought process.
Well, I'm interested in all those contradictions. And yes, it is a very industrial material, and I dislike the industrial quality of fabricated steel sculptures, which is why I've kept with this process of inflating and developing it over the time period I have. And I find a lot of interest in that, and that kind of play of the surface, play of the form. People assume it's something until they touch it. And it's when they touch the work and physically interact with it that conceptually things change for them. And the work becomes alive in a different way. It takes on those more organic qualities. I mean, the work is very organic, to be honest with you. I could take the same pattern and inflate it 100 times, and each piece will come out very individual and unique. So I'm very intrigued by that. But each piece becomes alive within itself. There's the control of the fabrication, and then during the inflation process, I kind of have to step back and let what happens. Sometimes these pieces explode and pop. after many, many hours of work on them. And I've just learned to appreciate what that can do for me visually and conceptually as well.
So would you say that your process and your goal in a way in manipulating the material to kind of mimic another is there a playfulness, or is it like just curiosity in the studio of
Oh,
seeing
no,
how
there's playfulness and whimsy for sure that is involved within the work. So
I was talking to somebody who saw your work, and she had a question of like, she was like, they're just like plastic inflated clouds. And I was like, no, actually they're steel. And for her, she was just like, oh my gosh, like she was so excited to learn the material because of the way that it reads.
yeah, you
And
just don't expect that hardness of something that has a soft look to it.
yeah,
But
so
again,
it was just like, it was just a cool, like to see that click for them was really a neat experience.
when you just spoke about this person's reaction to them being steel, that to me is the moment I'm looking for throughout all my work. Because it's that moment. We're only taught to look at artwork. It's only recently in the past decade that, especially with digital environments and installations, that we begin to immerse ourselves more in art environments. And so I consider myself an object maker, and I want people to engage with the objects that I engage with as I make them. And so tactility and touch is very important. And that question is, why is a plastic object in a gallery? What makes this so important? And it's only when they touch the work that attitude and that perspective changes. So for me, that's the magical moment.
So in this instance, your pieces are hanging and they're out of reach of the public. And so I'm curious how you would like the public to respond in this setting.
At this point, I don't really know, because this project for me is the first time I've ever done something like this in terms of the scale and the scope. I've got public artwork in Dallas and in other places in Houston in private collections, but this one, people can't touch this work, so they don't get that response. So that was a new environment for me. I just wanted to create something that was fun and whimsical and would take people's minds off of the stress of air travel, to be honest with you. I travel back home to the UK, and it can be very stressful stuck in an airport. And you're right, at times we are flash focused on where do we have to get to next, if we've got a transfer flight or, our time is cut short. But there's also occasions where flights get delayed and we have to stay in the airport. When we were installing, flights got delayed and people were really interested in what we were doing. And we found people lying underneath the clouds at night, just watching them. So it becomes a relaxing environment just to take your mind off of the stress. And to be honest, that's what I'm really pleased about being a part of the HAA Airport collection, because, walking through Hobby is just lovely.
Even like the windows that are by the piece, like you kind of look out into a field. And so there's this really great relationship between the actual clouds, like the actual Texas clouds, and your piece and how it's hanging at the end of the terminal. That's really just like a nice connector.
There's a pull and push with outside and inside. And I appreciate that. I mean, the piece was inspired by being up here on the Llano Estacado. We are by medium, the flattest part of the planet, just north of Lubbock. It's so flat, you see the curvature of the earth. So it is like an ocean. And so there's a real cloud appreciation society out here. My daughter's at UT Austin, and so she loves clouds. And so one of the things we do to connect with each other is send text images of clouds, and they become inspirations for other artworks and installations. Then I had a show at Anya Tish 2 years ago, and for some reason I made a couple of little clouds and they just felt right. And so it was a form and an object I wanted just to keep developing and evolving. So I develop concepts through my form and through working. Thinking for me is doing. I love making stuff. I love taking stuff apart. That is where my brain and my heart become activated. That's what led me to art school and to where I am right now. So to some degree, I let the work do the talking. I let it lead me rather than me trying to lead it.
Great. Well, can you share with us any technical, like really technical challenges that you had during this process, either with the artwork or even just like moving through this like public art process that we're working in?
I'm not going to say any of this was a challenge other than physically making 30 pieces that were to my satisfaction, that would satisfy the needs of what I'd proposed. It all went quite smoothly, and I would suspect the other artists and teams might agree with me that the way this project or these projects were put forward and the committees that were doing that did a really smooth, diligent job. And that's what made it easier.
You made the clouds that, you know, you felt best represented you as an artist for this piece. And so I'm curious, how many clouds did you make overall? And was it an editing process?
Yeah, I made more just so I had spares in case I dropped one or one popped on me. So the original design for the cloud was like a 3-humped cumulus nimbus cloud, a very kind of, which we see now in our iPhones. So a very pop culture aspect. So that was my natural instinct, was to, hey, let's just see how this works. And then from there, I developed and evolved 2 other patterns and designs that I really enjoyed. So there's 3 different designs, 10 of each. And likewise with the colors, I'm using just 3 colors: snow white, silver white, and a platinum pearl.
Mm-hmm.
And I just randomly would pick a cloud and paint it. So they all weren't the same.
And then you mentioned that you have done other public art installations, and I'm curious how this one differed from your other experiences.
The other large public art piece I've got is at Texas Sculpture Walk with Hall Arts Hotel in Dallas. It's a large piece that's outside, so it's with the weather. This obviously being a much larger project, but also being on the interior, had its own kind of funness, I would say, like driving a scissor lift from the entrance of the airport all the way to gate 50 with 1,000,003 people watching you at 5 o'clock at night with a loud siren beeping away at 1 mile an hour. And we have to lift sheets of plywood to cover the tile so the tile doesn't get damaged. And when we got to the destination, the whole airport erupted in applause. So that was wonderful. So this was very much more being as a performance than just showing up to a site and installing a work. It was 65 degrees on the ground. I'd go up 25 feet in the scissor lift and it was 103 degrees. So all of a sudden I start sweating profusely.
Yeah.
So it was very fun. I enjoyed it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
But I think you bring up an interesting point as it relates to public art, where, you know, an artist who's making artwork in a gallery or for a show, it's an isolated event, you know, like they're making their thing and then they take that and hang it prior to the show. But in this sense, like you said, a performance, like people are witnessing and watching the actual like installation process, and so they get insight into that work even more so. And I think it's an interesting just takeaway for me to think about, and for artists to think about as they're moving into like installation stage in these public arenas.
I really enjoyed that. It makes you think on your feet too, because the general public most of the time is not afraid to ask questions either. What is this? Why is this here? What are you doing? And it puts you in, it's like, woo, okay, I'm an artist. This is an installation. These are artworks. Feel free to have a touch. And you open the door and answer their questions. And I really enjoyed having the public witness what we as artists go through when we do these public works, these public commissions. The only thing I really wish I could do is hang out with the work more. You know, we drove 8 hours from Lubbock. We got to Hobby in a torrential rainstorm to pick up a scissor lift. Security was screaming at us. It was just one wonderful thing after the next. We got the install done. All these little factors that you don't think about, but just made the whole experience very wonderful. I will never forget this. It will remain one of my highlights of my creative career so far, and I hope I have many more.